After doing my extensive breakdown video of the Power Rangers 2017 movie, I wanted to revisit the sequel. Now, a lot of people don't know that there was actually a graphic novel written for the movie that was supposed to take place between movie 1 and 2, although I think it really makes more sense for it to be in between the Zord battle against Goldar and the final scene where they're in detention, but I'll get to that later. This was actually a gift to me, and I'm not really much of a comic person, so I was a little puzzled at first, and I read it, but I didn't think much of it. But after I did my breakdown video, I was very intrigued, and I wanted to revisit it and see what was it leading up to in the second movie. And I wanted to analyze how well did it portray these characters from the movie now in this comic. Was it consistent with the character development from the movie or not? By the end of this movie, remember that they all became a very tight-knit team, and they all work really well together at this point and have become friends. Now, we start off 1 week after the attack on the city from Goldar and Rita. There's a refugee camp set up in the middle of Angel Grove's park. The hotels and schools around the city are all booked up with people who lost their homes. And there are still people missing. There are people going up to the police chief asking if they have seen their kid, or they send them to a tent that they're looking for missing people there. Now, this raises the question of why is this possibly in the middle of those scenes in the end of the movie, because they're all in detention at the end of this movie, and this book instantly says that, oh, the schools are booked up with refugees, everybody is just trying to get through this disaster, but they portray them all going to detention as if, things are normal. So I wonder if that scene is actually a month or so later when this graphic novel took place. The town I grew up in actually had, about 10 years ago, a tornado go through the town, and the same sort of situation happened where there were churches and there was community centers, and the school were all housing people and trying to help people, make sure that people who lost their homes had somewhere to go. And definitely they had to shut down the school for several weeks, and they had to get things going. So that detention scene to me just can't be possible. And it also kind of makes me think, after a disaster like that, it kind of surprises me they would even continue to do detention. Now, as the chief of police is trying to help people, there are these semis that come in with these big letters on them that say Samaritan Relief, sort of like a Red Cross organization. And that's when we meet Melanie Shear. She comes to the chief of police and tells them that they had to pull some different units and different things from other disaster places that they're working on, but they came to the city of Angel Grove to help them with their recovery. Now, the chief of police is describing the whole situation as their own little Katrina, and Melanie says that they have medical supplies, tents, and everything they need. Just tell them where to go. As the chief of police sets off, we see Melanie talking into an earpiece. She says, "Green light to deploy." We see people who are getting dressed up in civilian clothes as to sort of integrate themselves into the town of Angel Grove to look like they're also refugees. We also see these operators sitting next to these screens in the semis, and what seems to be a satellite or drone shot of the city on a computer. Melanie finishes by saying we only have 3 days until questions are going to start being asked. So we know that Samaritan Relief is some sort of dicey organization. It sounds like maybe there's some sort of secret government organization, but it's an organization of some sort that came to Angel Grove, but we don't know why yet. Now, the second part of why I think that this takes place in between those scenes in the movie is that Jason returns the power sword in the command center, and I'm thinking maybe this happened before that because Goldar's dust is still activating putties randomly. It should wear off, they say, but it's making these putties meaner and nastier than before, and they have no one they're answering to. They're just kind of going crazy around town, and the Rangers are just sort of picking them off whenever they come up. Early action scene, and this is definitely something that I think the movie lacked a little bit, was getting that action in right at the beginning, making sure that people were really excited. But we do get to see a good action scene of Jason and Trini fighting a bunch of putties. And now this is an odd pairing because in the movie, Jason and Trini weren't really together at any point. Typically, it was Billy, Jason, and Kimberly together, and Zach and Trini were together. But Trini's character does seem pretty accurate to me from the movie. By the end of the movie, she breaks from being this closed-off person to being the person who uplifts her team. She's encouraging everybody in their final battle, and she makes a very big switch, and she tells Jason in the comic to not overthink it. And I think this is really her saying that she trusts him, that she believes in him as a leader. She even calls him boss, and Jason says, "Don't call me that." In this scene, there's some narration going on. Jason is narrating, sort of comparing the Rangers as a football team, and of course that's very on par with the movie as well. In the TV show, Jason was very into martial arts. That was his main thing. In the movie, he was a football player, he was an athlete, so that's very accurate that he would use that as an example. And he says he was chosen to be the leader, but he says that not everyone sees it that way, and I assume that he's talking about Zordon, because by the end of the movie, the whole team is pretty on board with him as the leader, but maybe Zach is the only one who has any sort of beef. But by the end of the movie, Zordon really came around to believing in Jason too, so this is a little bit of a plot hole to me for what the movie left off with. Then we see Billy, Zach, and Kimberly, and Kimberly is saying, are there more putties than usual? Billy's questioning whether or not they're fighting new putties, or these are just the same putties and they're just coming back over and over and over again. And then Billy starts questioning how they can hit so hard because they're defying the laws of physics. And Zach responds with, "Billy, only you complain about being awesome." And Zach seems to be psyched about what he can do physically. He wants to find out what's the ceiling of his powers, which I think is pretty on brand with Zach as well from the movie. He was a thrill seeker. He loved to see what he could do, and he's also a very powerful fighter, and they really depicted that in the comic. That's his fighting style, and I think it's really on brand for all of them, because Kimberly is the reasonable thinker. Billy thinks about things that no one else would question. A family's van gets flipped over and a putty starts pushing it over the edge. The Rangers do end up saving them. Kimberly does some quick thinking and she saves them. Now they return to the command center, and Zordon tells them that they are learning to use their powers, and that with them growing in their powers, he's gaining more and more faith in them. Zordon in the movie, if you watch the video, he definitely had no faith in the team at the beginning, which is a very dark, gritty way to look at Zordon, of course, but he did finally come around to letting them be the team when he let Billy come back to life instead of himself when the morphing grid opened up. The hesitation on believing in them is a bit redundant to me, as the movie kind of already covered that. Zordon assures them that the Goldar dust will lose its power soon and tells them to get some rest. He pulls Jason aside and he questions Jason, asking if he still believes he should be the leader, saying that Jason has to lead by example and he has to master his skills above everybody else. And he warns Jason that others are going to come now that they know the Power Rangers are back, which Rita also warned them at the end of the movie. And this is really offensive to Jason after the fact that Zordon seemed to have come around, just seems to still not believe in him fully. Now we cut to a place called Heavenly Hills, which is about 15 minutes outside of Angel Grove, and we meet our villains of the comic. We meet Aubrey and her little brother Jacob, the Hogan twins. They're two juvenile delinquents who use the opportunity of the Goldar attack to escape custody. Aubrey isn't too worried, knowing that the cops are really busy dealing with this disaster that's going on. Their top priority is not to catch them. But they're in an old sawmill and they're on their own. They aren't the greatest kids. They really have a hatred for Angel Grove, and even Aubrey's saying that she hopes that that monster comes back and destroys the whole city. Jacob hears something outside the mill. He goes out and he gets absorbed by what seems to be a putty. Now we get to go back to the pit.
Going to the pit.
Zach is training down. Billy comes down telling him he needs to get more sleep, and he says average high school students need 9 hours of sleep to function properly, and you're quite below that. Not that I'm calling you average. I'm sure you're above average, moderately speaking. This cadence in the speech reminds me of the way R.J. Kyler made Billy speak. You know, starting something and sort of getting sidetracked with another thought, you know, talking about get some sleep, and then average, oh, I'm not saying you're average. He's kind of going off on this tangent. And that is very accurate to the way Billy is in the movie. Zach is beating himself up over the dad that almost died in a car accident, even though Kimberly saved him. And it's affecting him personally because he grew up without a dad. And in the movie, we know that Billy's father passed away. We didn't know much about Zach's father. So they both understand each other's feelings, but We're getting more insight to Zach that we didn't get in the movie, which is what I wanted from this graphic novel, is to see more about these characters, because we don't know a lot about Zach or Trini at this point. We go to Jason dropping off Kimberly for the night, and Kimberly expresses that her family is upset about their lawn being brown. She's sickened by this because there's all these people suffering, and yet her parents seem to be very petty and focused on their image. We didn't really learn much about that in the movie. All we saw was her dad from a distance being upset that she cut her hair. Jason is asking Kim if he's a good leader, and she's telling him to be a good leader, you have to listen to your team. Jason starts to bring up the fact of them being a potential couple when they hear an explosion in town. And Jason says, I have the worst luck. And then Kim says, we have the worst luck, giving a little nod at, we're together. And Jason looks at his power coin. It's glowing. And he says, I guess it's morphin' time. There's no morpher yet. I was hoping in the graphic novel they would have the morpher. We see this sort of morpher emblem on their suits in the movie and in the graphic novel, but we don't get the actual morpher that they sold at the time of the movie. I have one. It's a cool collector's item. Now, during the first battle, we see the operators with Samaritan Relief. Melanie Shear says, it's them, let's move. Now, I'm assuming at this point they're looking for the Power Rangers. I assume the government maybe wants to know something about these Power Rangers. I have a whole video that kind of talks about how Lightspeed Rescue, Alphabet Soup, and some of these things that come from later Power Ranger seasons are probably inspired by the government trying to figure out who are these superheroes and these big giant Zords they use, and it's sort of the reaction of the government saying, well, what if we need to be able to protect ourselves like these Power Rangers protect people? Jason and Kimberly are the first to the scene. They help a woman up. They ask her if there were putties that attacked her, and she says it was them and points over, and you see Aubrey and Jacob there. Jacob is this like half putty mutant looking thing. Then we get a quick backstory about Aubrey and Jacob. It shows them at their parents' funeral, and they talk about how everybody left them. All the people at the funeral, I guess none of them ever reached out to help them. And so as kids, they turned to pretty much a life of crime, trying to steal food, whatever they needed to survive. And of course, they ended up in juvie. All they really want is power. They don't want to be, these kids who have nothing anymore. Has some sort of connection to a putty. He's fought the Power Rangers before, and he's saying they've been promised power if they kill the Rangers. Jacob is telling Aubrey to go down. He's pointing to what seems to be a patched hole. Now, at first I thought they were talking about the Zeo Crystal, but I think it's part of Goldar. I think it's maybe part of him that went underground. And Jacob is talking as if he's fought the Power Rangers before. Says, I remember being 40 feet tall. So I think he has connection to Goldar, not just a putty. Now Aubrey goes down. She finds something that looks like a hand, and she touches it. Nothing happens, and she's getting scared. She starts to run back out, and at this point the whole team is there. Aubrey and Jacob, they run away. Now back at the command center, Zordon confirms this is Goldar taking over Jacob. Billy knows the twins as the Hogan twins. Aubrey calls him little brother though, so I'm not quite sure. I guess twins usually like to compare themselves as who's the oldest. Billy tells him that their dad died in the same accident that his dad died in. So Jason says they should split up to find the twins, and then he's questioned by Zach and Trini on whether or not they should, and he leaves saying, I'll be out there doing something. It annoys me that Zordon isn't reassuring the team that Jason is their leader. He tells them to get some sleep, and then tells Alpha he missed a fundamental problem in a Ranger before, referring to Rita Repulsa as the Green Ranger, saying he doesn't want to make that mistake again. Alpha says they're kids, they screw up, it makes them stronger in the end. It's just a bit of backtracking. I'm sure they told these people Zordon doesn't completely believe in them, but I don't think they gave them a clear sign that, Zordon comes around and he believes in them by the end of the movie. Now, the cops are downtown dealing with the aftermath of just that recent attack. Melanie Shear is there and tells the cops a saying, what's better than a 10-foot wall, an 11-foot ladder. Melanie later is seen in an underground area looking for something with another guy. He holds up what looks like a wrinkled hand, and then Melanie says, I found my 11-foot ladder. We don't know exactly what that hand is yet or why she's really looking for it. Now we get a quick scene where the twins have what seemed to be a body. Maybe it's Goldar, shrunk down to like a normal person size, but Aubrey is taken over just like her brother was, and she shoots out this big ray of light. As the Rangers are leaving the command center, Jason stops them and tells them he's terrified to be a leader. He said he looked up all these phrases like flank online, and he's been using them to try to sound smart, but he really doesn't know what they mean. The leadership position is a burden, and he needs them as a team. And he asks them if they would please help him. Before they can respond, Alpha 5 calls them. The twins have combined and grown into a giant monster. As stated earlier, the twins hate Angel Grove, and they have a huge vendetta against the whole town. So they're just as passionate about wanting to destroy it as Goldar that's infecting their minds. We get a Zord appearance. The artwork is beautiful on this. I said it in the review, but the Zords are really awesome. A lot of people hate on them, but I love the fact that I can look at them really closely because the movie moves very fast. So sometimes it's kind of hard to appreciate and see all the little intricacies of the Zords. So I like that it's in this and we get to look at it a little closer. Now the monster grabs a tower pole. I feel like this is an Easter egg to Ivan Ooze grabbing the tower in the 1995 movie. Hey, whoa, did this comment do an Easter egg? I think that's the first main Easter egg we've gotten the whole time. A monster stabs the Triceratops with a pole and he sends the T-Rex flying. So the monster's heading towards the refugee camp. The Rangers are flustered and they tell Jason to make a call. He tells them to combine into the Megazord. A few good hits and the monster is defeated. The twins are back to normal human size but still part monster. Zach comes down to distract the two. The twins are saying that Angel Grove deserves it for not helping them through their hard life. Zach being the one earlier in the comic talking about growing up without a dad, he says a tough life isn't an excuse. Then Jason and Kimberly come down with electrical wires zapping the two. This leaves them in a sort of petrified state where they're kind of like statues now. Now Melanie Shear and the cop come across the two twins and she volunteers to house the bodies until they figure something out. The police officer says that would be great and then he says, "Now get out of my town." Melanie Shear seems a bit shocked and trying to convince him that they are there to help. The cop knows that there's something about her he doesn't like. He says she's dangerous, and she still doesn't admit to anything being wrong, but she says they'll leave. Now we cut to Kimberly and Trini walking together. Kim thanks Trini for helping Jason make a decision, and then Trini's saying that she can't really be a cheerleader. She's not very rah, rah, rah. In her family, they annoy each other, and even if people hate them for it, it makes them better. So she's saying that she's going to push Jason to be the best leader that he can be, but she's honoring him as a leader, but she's going to push him to make the decisions. And I mean, this is very true about her family, because I don't know if you've seen the movie, but her mom's a bit of a psychopath.
Pee in that cup!
And Kim says, "So what you're saying is you care about us." Trini walks off and says, "You know me, go Power Rangers." The picture in the comic shows her raising her fist up in the air, which is, of course, a Breakfast Club Easter egg. So all those people who compared the movie to the Breakfast Club, they did it in the comic. They actually had her put her fist up, just like the ending scene. So that was cool. Jason is either narrating or talking to Zordon. I'm not really sure. But he talks about his football coach's analogy of a team being like a fire. And during that, we see Billy visiting his dad's grave. We see Zach training even harder. Alpha 5 detects something and sends the Rangers to check it out. We see the hand that Melanie Shear took, and it's in this jar. And they realize that it's a trap, and they're instantly surrounded by a bunch of armed guards. Melanie Shear is there, and she tells them that she works for Apex. She says that the American government applauds them for their efforts, but don't like aliens fighting their battles. She tells them if they step out of line, she'll be back with bigger weapons. She also says that she has these twins to work on in the meantime. The end of the sequel to Saban's 2017 Power Rangers movie. Unfortunately, we never got a sequel, which really sucks, but it was cool that we have this little graphic novel to at least have something in addition to the movie to look at. I'm not a professional writer, so I'm not an expert on how to tell stories, but I am a massive Power Ranger fan, and I've consumed a lot of Power Rangers content. Take my comments with a grain of salt. You know, the storyline of Jason being a leader was a bit of a waste to me, because the movie had a lot to do with that. It was sort of showing him become a leader and establishing him, and he really was a natural leader. and he already proved himself. This comic came out in March of 2017, which is when the movie came out, so they probably didn't do a lot of comparing it to what the movie was like. So I think they probably just gave this project to somebody else. They did what they could with it, and they went with a pretty logical storyline of, you know, someone learning how to be a leader. But the movie had great character development for, you know, kind of the main three, Jason, Kimberly, and Billy, but they didn't have a lot for Zach and Trini. And Zach and Trini are very intriguing people, and I wish they would have used this opportunity to maybe give us more backstory into them, or show more about their experience, or maybe just give us more insight to their first experiences of becoming a ranger, because we didn't really get to see that as much. There's some questions about them that I have, like Trini is doing a kata to metal music on the mountain, so where did she learn her fighting style? Zach is a very strong fighter as well, but, you know, learning where their fighting styles came from would be very interesting. Also, a lot of people criticize Becky G's performance. I strongly disagree that she was bad, but there are people who seem to just go after her about it. If that's true, then they could have used this opportunity to expand Trini more as a character. If they think she's the least trained actor of the bunch, they could have focused on Trini's character, given a little more insight. But there was also a lot of potential in it that I think they missed out on. I mean, they talk about Billy having a connection to the Hogan twins, that his dad and their dad were in the same accident. They don't even have him address that with them at all, which I thought, why isn't Billy up there talking to them saying, I know what it's like, I've been through it just like you guys? But they didn't even, you know, they didn't show anything about it. It was also a great learning moment that Billy could have said, you know, I took a different path. It's showing him blowing up the quarry, but he was searching for something, but he didn't do it in a negative way that was going to harm others. And we also address Zach's loss of a parent, but we don't know whether his dad left or died, and we could have had a bigger connection to him or know more about his backstory. And to be quite honest with you, I'm pretty upset they didn't have a single Krispy Kreme reference in the whole entire comic. I mean, it's really ridiculous. It ain't the 2017 movie without a Krispy Kreme. It ain't the 2017 movie without a Krispy Kreme reference. You know what I'm saying? Come on, guys. Know your universe. Overall, though, the artwork is amazing. The suits and the Zords are so cool to look at. I absolutely love that I have this comic. It's just a cool collector's item because I doubt they're ever going to print it again. But I know a lot of people attack the 2017 movie. But in researching my breakdown video, I came across the cover of Stand By Me by Bootstraps that was in the movie. And I started reading the comments section, and there was a lot of young kids commenting on this, saying stuff like, oh man, this brings back memories. This was my childhood. I loved it so much. You know, like, I know the movie's only 5-6 years old, but there's kids who were 5 or 6 or 7 who are now, you know, in their teens, and they have a very strong love for this movie. And I think it's so much like Star Wars, because when the Star Wars prequels came out, all the older fans bashed it continuously. They didn't give it even a chance. But when the younger generation who grew up on it got older, and they start saying, no, we like the movies, and all of you are just kind of old bigots who won't even give it a shot. And that's really what I'm seeing with this, I think, is that the 2017 movie was a great movie, but, you know, we have all these older fans who just won't accept it because, well, I want the original cast. I don't care about this. And they just have a very closed off opinion. And I think it's something that this movie franchise is obviously dead, but I think it's going to live on. I think there's people who are going to love it, and I hope it just gains the respect that it deserves over time. But this graphic novel was just a cool little thing to take a look at. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a good one.